O Master, may thy joy fill our days. O Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways. That time has come for us to see that there's but one reality upon the earth and high above. The truth that all was made from love, a love that calls to us to fly above the hills, above the sky, above the storms, above the pain, a land where peace and laughter reign. Oh, you can join us on this part. Master, may thy joy fill our days. Oh, Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways. Guide all our hopes and all our dreams, past every glow that only sees, into the light, the inner sun, into the truth that we're all one. Help us to find in every hour, in every thought, in every flower, a joy that spans eternity, the truth that makes us ever free. Oh, Master, may thy joy fill our days. Oh, Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways. Oh, Master, may thy joy fill our days. Oh, Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways.
So happy more Swamiji Discipleship Anniversary. It's so nice to extend the celebration from Thursday, the actual day, through the weekend and beyond. And I wanted to speak about a few things about Swamiji. One, his kindness, and two, his ability to have been able to connect with God inwardly for that joy as opposed to outwardly. But first I want to read something. This is from an article that we often have available for people. It's in our one of our discipleship books that everyone reads. And it's from a talk that Swamiji gave. This article we call How to Be a True Disciple. And I just can't read it enough times. I'm not going to read the full thing, but I'll read some parts that apply. When I came to him, this is Swamiji when he came to Master, he asked two things of me. First, he said, I give you my unconditional love, and he asked that of me. Then he also asked me to give him my unconditional obedience. This was something I wasn't sure about, even though I was desperate to be accepted. In my mind, I was like, gotta make the font bigger. There we go. Where is it? Okay. Okay. This was something I wasn't sure about, even though I was desperate to be accepted. In my mind, I was saying, you just have to accept me. But still, I wanted to be honest. So I said, but suppose, sir, should I ever think you wrong? He said, what I tell you to do won't be my desire or opinion. I will say it because God tells me to say it. How could I reply to that? I gave him my unconditional obedience on the basis that I would certainly follow him as the voice of God. This is what it is to follow the Guru and to have the kind of obedience that doesn't say, well, my Guru said this, but St. Francis or Ramana Maharshi said something else. It means having that level of intuition that says, I know this is for me. I have to say that although I have had a doubting nature, one doubt I've never had for a split second is Master my Guru? Is he mine or not? I knew from the moment I met him that he was mine. If anybody tried to persuade me that another one was greater, it didn't matter to me. Mine could be the second best, but he was still mine. This attitude of openness in the disciples' part makes it possible to have that level of intuition to know what it is you are receiving. This intuition doesn't come by willpower or by anything but grace. But again, this grace isn't given to certain people because of something in their personality or because they've somehow phrased their prayers in the right way. Nor does it come because they've been diplomatic enough in their self-presentation to God that he says, okay, you all listen to. No, he watches the heart. When he knows that your longing for him is deep enough, then he will give you the grace of faith. Pray for this grace that enables you to know your own way, to know what is yours. You can't will it yourself. You can't will this attitude, but you can pray for it and open yourself to it. Let's see. I think that's all I wanted to say. I thought there was one other thing. Sorry for the delay. I think that is what is meant to be said. The other part I was looking for was when he also mentioned that once we find our path, we need to stick with it. That very often people will come and they feel on fire, but then after a while, the little boredom comes in. Oh, I've read all the books, I've done all the meditations, I've done this, I've done that. It stays on an outer level. And when we find ourselves becoming bored or restless, then that means that we are not going deeper. And of course we can't say, okay, and now I will go deep. And then, okay, now I'm deep and now I'm not restless or bored. That deepness comes with the daily practice. And we go through dry periods of time where our hearts feel a little more closed. Usually it's related to a hurt that we have had that we need to process and open our hearts again around. You might notice when there is hurt, whether it's something someone did or just a feeling we have, it really closes us off. It makes us contractive. And when we get into that contractive state, it's very hard to be open to anything. So how can we be open to God when that little hurt is inside our hearts? It's impossible. So we have to do our best to dig out the hurts, show the light on any hurts, allow those hurts to heal. And know that it's okay for us to have an open heart no matter what anyone else is doing outside of us. So I wanted to use a little analogy in relation to Swamiji. He had such a deep connection to the divine. It took time for that connection to happen. And he had fully transferred his need for fulfillment, his need for approval, his need for anything to come from within. He had let go of his desire for people to behave in a different way. He had let go of his desire for circumstances to be other than what they are. He had let go of all those desires. But what replaces the disappointment, the hurt of these outer things not working out is that bliss that comes with the divine. And it's a slow transition. Maybe it's not slow for everyone, but it can be a slow transition where you're slowly replacing that, that felt great out there, with a, that feels great in here. It's a slow transition. And as Swamiji was saying, sometimes we have to feel a great disappointment or many, many great disappointments in the outer to finally drive us inwardly. I've made a comment a number of times about how sometimes my worst times, that I would say the worst times, also came with deep bliss. And earlier I used to think, that's the divine comforting me through a hard time. But what I really think it is it's the divine does this for all of us. A really hard thing happens that is related to the outer world, and then there's that bliss that can come in, and it does comfort, but it also says, look to me. Don't look to that, look to me. Feel me. Come to me in all circumstances. You feel this. There's one issue I've worked on probably my whole life that I won't say the specifics of it, but it really has to do with that same issue. And it can manifest as a disappointment in my heart. And over the years, I used to have great grief around that disappointment. And then over time, the grief has really turned into, I took that grief as a flag that, I'm looking to the outside. And so it's like a repeating issue. We all have these kinds of things. We don't necessarily recognize them as repeating issues. We're not always conscious of that. But once you can become conscious of a repeating thing that happens, like a feeling that continuously happens throughout certain types of disappointments, then you can really understand more that, that feeling means I'm looking outside myself. It's a flag. So rather than go into the feeling and saying, grief, disappointment, it's like, aha, I'm not going inward enough. I haven't fully replaced that desire with the desire for the divine. And slowly but surely, meditation does this for us. We replace our desires for all these other things just for the divine. And for someone who's really restless, that sounds boring. It's like, why would you want to do that? There's so many things to enjoy in the world. And certainly there are. This is not a path of just renouncing, I am a yogi. I renounce all things pleasurable to myself. There has to be a little oil to the wheels. There has to be something that, the beauty in the sky is something that's also the beauty that is in the astral world. The deep love we can share in our life is also a reflection of the deep love that is there in the astral. So Master said the things that are okay to be attached to are the things that are in the astral and beyond. So beauty, music, all these things are available in the astral. So if we are attached to these kinds of things, then we have a better chance of not coming back for a desire here. So cultivate the good desires if we have to have them. But this meditating that we do is really practicing meditation. And I wanted to give an example. I've been a musician my whole life. When I was a young kid, I took piano and flute. And then after 10 years, I just focused on the flute. And so as a young child, I began practicing. And when you're taking up an instrument, many of you know this through voice or an instrument, if I were to just practice because someday I'll be good, it's not enough to keep you going. Just like in meditation, It's not enough to keep you going in meditation to think, someday I'll be free. Someday I'll finally have an experience of the divine. Someday. That's not really what's going on. But very often that's what we'll say. That's not enough motivation to stay on the path. It's not enough motivation to meditate daily. With music, I had to have a love for music. I had to have a love for the beauty of that vibration that I was playing when I played my instrument. There had to be some daily thing, not just that I could play a note. And that's what we often do. It's like, okay, I sat, I meditated, I did my Hang Sa, I did all my techniques and sat. I did the required amount of time. But if you are not having enjoyment during that, it's not going to work. Just like with music, I had to enjoy what I was doing, even if I didn't sound very good. When you're first playing the flute, I've had many people say, I want to play the flute. It's like, great. Some have even gotten flutes. And then they realize after trying to play it for a couple of weeks, oh, it sounds horrible when I play. And it's like, yes. I started when I was like 8. And so, of course, as a child, progress is much more slowly than if you start as an adult. But, that you get good over time. And that doesn't just mean after a couple months of meditation or a couple months of practicing the flute. It takes a long time for that sound, that tone that comes out of the flute to sound good, to be enjoyable. But once that happens, then you get the notes right. You're playing certain songs, you get the notes right. But that's not enough either. Just like when you meditate and you get, okay, I did my technique correctly. Same with playing the instrument. You can't just get the notes right. It goes beyond that. Once the notes are right, then you can relax into the melody that you're playing. But it takes being able to play the notes right first, then you relax into the melody and open yourself up to be a channel for something God might want to have come through you. Same with meditation. We learn our meditation technique correctly. We're not too, I don't want to use the word strict, but we're not too obsessed with it. Let's put it that way. Like, I didn't do it perfectly, or because there's a lot of art involved in meditating. So when playing my flute, sometimes there can be a beautiful melody happening and you get a note wrong. And it's like, oh, I can either go, oh, the note was wrong, or say, wow, that melody felt really good. That melody that was coming, oh, well, one note was wrong, but same for meditation. And who's to say what's right or wrong? Once we learn the technique, we each have our own inner experience of that. Now, we have to follow it, One person got Kriya and then decided they're going to do something else and call it Kriya. It's not Kriya. You do Kriya the way we, say how to do Kriya. You don't suddenly, because you got initiated, start doing something else and say, well, that's Kriya. It won't work. It won't work. Like same with Hang Sa. You can't say, no, I prefer to say Soham or something else instead, because we had one guy who was through all the classes, yes, Hang Sa, Hang Sa, Hang Sa, Hang Sa. We never say Soham, Hang Sa, Hang Sa, Hang Sa. And then it got up to Kriya time. It's like, yes, I do Soham. It's like every time we said Hang Sa, he translated it in his head as Soham. It's like, no, we mean what we say. Master meant what he said. So don't try and interpret it in a different way. But meanwhile, there is lots of room for feeling. Lots of room for your own inner experience. So the technique is just like a system. The technique is like a frame for something. But meanwhile, you can dance in and out of the frame As long as you have the framework there, you can dance in and out of it with your own beautiful experiences of God. No one says you have to feel God this way. You know, Master does say there are many ways to experience God. Here's 8 that we often talk about, but there's a whole lot of ways to experience God. So does that mean I did Hong Sa a certain way and I'm doing Hong Sa, Hong Sa, Hong Sa? Where's the experience of God also? So this is where relaxation comes. This is where allowing the technique to make room for the art of the technique. It's a really beautiful experience. And so if we're just focusing on the technique, it's just not going to work. It's just like if I only focused on playing the notes right with the flute, it would sound wooden. It would sound uninspired. It would sound just empty. But when you add the feeling to the melody and you add the feeling to the meditation, then suddenly it becomes rich and wonderful. And so Swamiji did all of this and replaced, I don't know his full experience, but we have in the New Path, he talks about how he began not sure if God existed. So that's not like he was just born and said, God, you know, I'm completely connected to God, I'm an avatar. Instead, he shared his struggles with us to say, look, this is where I was. You can have the same thing that I have going through your experience. We very much could see, you know, first of all, I think by the time Swamiji had Ananda, he was already possibly self-realized then. Master said at the end of your life, you'll become self-realized. If he wasn't, he was very, very up there, if you want to say that. People felt him in bliss all the time. People could feel him. He talked about how he was unchanged over this life. He was never angry. He showed us this type of person who comes into this life who does not create karma anymore. That's what a Jivan Mukta is. A Jivan Mukta might have karma to work through, but they don't create new karma. And certainly we can try to not create new karma too, but the process of meditation naturally makes us in the state of not creating more karma. We can say, ooh, I created karma there. Ooh, I created karma there. But instead, if we're just meditating regularly, then over time, that tendency to create karma on an energetic level becomes removed over time. But we have to have that meditation there. That meditation creates the fire of Kundalini that goes up the Sushumna and brings that bliss and brings that inner joy and brings that replacement for outer to the inner. It's a process that happens. But it's a joyous process. And so remember the goal, rather than have it be this faraway goal, make daily goals for yourself. Master and Swamiji said, look at your day. How did your day go? Think at the end of the day, did I do things the way I would have been happy about? Would I have made Swamiji proud today with my behavior? And if not, then we try to do better the next day. Swamiji had a very important thing that he passed on at Ananda, and that was the concept of kindness. And one of the things he said was that he was aware of unkindnesses he had done before he got on the path. He could think of things that he did that he didn't feel proud of. And yet, he said, and so I have tried to live my life in kindness, hopefully to make up for any of that. So we don't know if he actually created bad karma doing that. It's very doubtful, whatever he did. But he's telling all of us that no matter what our sins of the past have been, that if we just try and be as kind as possible now, that we can help make up for the things that might have done it. It's a beautiful thing. He created Ananda on the basis of kindness. And so that means we catch ourselves when we've been unkind. It doesn't mean now I am perfectly kind. I never do unkindness. We can't help it. We have reactions. But we can apologize, and we can strive to do better. We can realize that when we are angry at something, really there is just anger inside of ourselves. And that anger finds a reason to come out. It's not that other person. The anger lives inside. If there's no anger inside, suppose you have two people, one with anger inside and one without anger inside, and the same situation comes up. The person with anger will respond with anger. The person without anger will not respond in that way. They'll respond in a different way. They may still respond to an adharmic thing or something that's not right, but they won't respond in anger. Master said anger is that which anger gets created when we want something to be other than it is. Doesn't mean we don't change things, but when we want something to be other than it is, we have that anger tendency. And so that's wonderful to know, because then when we get angry, we can say, what was it I wanted that I didn't get? What was it? And slowly but surely we find out, oh, I wanted that person to be other than who they were. Why did this have to happen? Why did that have to happen? When you're no longer living in that mentality, there's a whole lot more to live in that is very inspiring and joyful. Doesn't mean that we live our lives in a brainless way where, oh, it's okay if, they hit me on the head with a frying pan, or, it's okay that this person verbally abuses me every day, and, oh, it's all God. If we really felt that way, that's one thing. But usually we don't. And so it's okay to have boundaries and say, that doesn't work for me. I'm going to kindly say it this way, It's not working for me for you to do that. I'm going to have to take a step back until you learn not to treat me that way. It's up to you, actually. If you are treating me that way, you will find me distant. And so if you're attached to having a great relationship with someone who slaps you on the face all the time, then you're going to remain in the conflict. But if you say, oh, they just can't help it, then I'm going to just take a step back. I'm still going to send love, but I won't receive the slap. And that's a model for all types of slaps, not physical slaps, but all sorts of slaps, because words are power. So Swamiji really came in a master of kindness in this life. And I think of my times with him, and I just say, what was so nice about him was when we were with him, he wasn't saying, I wish you would just be a different way than how you are. Meaning, here we were, kind of restless, still kind of like, why'd that devotee say that? We were in that a lot more. And he could have said, stop it, don't do that anymore, come on, behave. He could have said all of those things, like, everybody, get in line, and kind of managed us and controlled how people were. But instead, he was just there giving us that unconditional love and support, not without spine. He was still always, this is the goal, everyone. This is the goal up here. but not, so don't be where you are. There was none of that. There was compassion for people's suffering. Because what are we doing if we are not feeling God's full presence yet? If we're not feeling that all our desires align with God? If we are not feeling disappointed anymore if we are still feeling disappointed in the things out there, that creates so much suffering. But that suffering is just wishing those things to be other than what they were, what they are. But it creates suffering. And it's real suffering. It's not like, if you were just more spiritual, you wouldn't have that suffering. It's not that. We have these attachments, these vrittis in our chakras that come like this when we're born. And so it's a matter of unwinding those vrittis, letting the vrittis go. But it takes time. And so it's real suffering we have. And that desire to have human relationships fulfill us in a certain way, no matter what relationship it is, child, parent, spouse, friend, that desire to have it fulfilled in a certain way and have that person give us the love we deserve, all of that goes away when you have enough love inside. It's not a theoretical thing. It's not like, yes, I now have enough love inside, I will not be disappointed by what anyone says anymore. It's a reality that suffering is a flag that we just need to turn it inward. If every time we have that suffering, we, rather than go to the person and try and shake the feeling we should get out of them, because really all we want is unconditional love from everyone, right? We just want unconditional love. So rather than go to the person and try and shake it out of them or shame them, if you really loved me, you would do this, or why haven't you called me, or whatever it is, then as soon as we feel the need to do that, just go to your altar and say, Master, I know I am trying to get it this way. Help me feel that bit of divine love and joy inside. And then guess what you do? Rather than try and take it from someone, you just give it to people. You just give that love to others. It's an impersonal love, but it's a real love. Swamiji was incredibly detached, and yet you felt his love in a personal way. So it wasn't like I am radiating from the Supreme Formless, and you shall feel that love, but it's not from me, and it's, it was a very personal thing on one level, and yet it was very detached on the other level, but it felt real. It didn't feel like, oh, he's just radiating love because he's supposed to, because he's the leader and he's supposed to. This was the way he lived. You gonna come in, Lakshmi? Her poor little ankles are broken. Can you believe it? There she is. Come in. Okay. Anyway, so when we go home today, try and write a list. Write 10 things down of things that made you mad. Of things that's not a hard list, is it? Are you sure that shouldn't be 20 or 30 or 40 things? Maybe just, a book. We all have a book of those things. They're called our vrittis in our chakras. The Akashic records. That's all they are, our disappointments and desires. We have vrittis full of them. But we're probably conscious of a few. Maybe just write down the ones you want to change for now. And that would be related to any extreme reaction that is there. The most extreme is the one to try and have. However, Swamiji also said, choose your battles. If some super desire is just so you bang your head against the wall and can't change it, do some easier desires, work on a few easier desires, and then that might take some energy away from the harder one that you have to face someday. So have that kindness for yourself, that kindness for others, that awareness of the flags of disappointment that really mean just look inside. Swamiji taught us all of this in such a beautiful way. And, he wasn't with us all the time. Everyone who says, I lived with Swamiji, they didn't see him sometimes every week. Sometimes he would go off into seclusion for months at a time. When we were all near the village, one day he just announced, I'm moving to Europe. I'm going to move there. It's like, huh? We were used to having these weekends with him, or, once a month or something with him. And you're just going to go? And he needed to shift the energy. And so he was there, and he would come back once a year. And so it required us to feel that inner connection to him and not rely on just his presence being there, his physical presence. It trained us, actually, to go within and feel that connection with him. And it is still such a living connection. How is it that, the majority of the people in this room don't know Swamiji from a personal physical place, weren't here when he came to Chennai at one time, or they visited him, and yet so many people have a deep love for him, so many people feeling that connection? It's because it's a living connection, and it says a lot of people who have that connection to Swamiji, to Master, to people who are not in the body, to all our gurus. It says there is a deep intuition inside of me that can connect in that way. That's a huge start to what we need to do in life. And so anyway, I want to wish everyone this happy Swamiji discipleship, and congratulations almost to the new disciples. We'll have a ceremony soon after Dharmarajan speaks.